So, the format of tonight's meeting is I'll speak to Graham. We'll share for 15 to 20 minutes. After that, we'll pick names out of the hat and you'll be invited to share from the floor. We ask that you keep bad language to a minimum. Sharing time will finish at 9 o'clock and the final part of the meeting is reserved for CA announcements. That just leaves me to introduce Graham.
Thanks very much. Without further ado, straight in. It's scary up here, isn't it? It's really scary. Okay, I'm Graham, I'm an addict. Do you know what, I did say I'm going to waffle a bit for a minute because I'm just going to get into my flow. The scariest thing that I can hear when I come up and do a share is like you've only got 15 to 20 minutes because I sort of waffle a bit at the beginning because I'm nervous and then I get excited and then I'm really into it and then you can't shut me up and I've always been like that in recovery and I'm glad I've still got that excitement, enthusiasm and passion for the programme. So I did something last weekend. I went back up to Essex and I was driving back on the Sunday back to my home here in Bournemouth and I'd done a share all the way home because I was anticipating this meeting and I've done loads of shares over the years and you know sometimes it's been daunting and frightening and nothing more frightening than tonight. So I did the share all the way home and it was quite remarkable. I even convinced myself I was a guru. It was so good, I can't remember anything about it. Okay, so I don't know where this is going to go. It's going to go all over the place. I've got no set sort of share anymore. I used to have, but I haven't anymore. So I came into recovery a few years ago. I went to my first meeting. It was Friday, the 5th of February 2010. It was at St Andrew's Church in Watford, and I sat there and I listened to the chair, and as I sat there, something really, I don't like to use the word profound, but it was quite deep and meaningful, and this profound thing come over me as I sat there and listened to this guy. This thought come into my head: what, you too? I thought it was only me that felt like this. And it just really, really hit me. And as I listened to this guy, we had a very similar story, similar family and wife and children and job, business and all of that stuff. And as he went on to describe about how he'd lost his wife and his children, he'd become homeless and, you know, he ended up drinking on a park bench, and I just thought to myself, that is not happening to me. I've got an opportunity here and that is not happening to me, and I'm going to grab this with both hands, and that's what I did, and as a result of that, since the 2nd of February 2010 I haven't had to drink or use. I've lost the accession to drink or use as a result of working this programme in my life as best as I can and as consistently as I can, and that actually quite impresses me. So we've all got a different story, and some of us, I've heard loads of guys in this meeting and other meetings and share about when we first started using, and some of us were kids in our teens or 20s or whatever. I didn't start using cocaine until I was I think 38. And it came into my life at a time when I was at my lowest ebb. I've realised as I've gone through my recovery that my greatest obsession and my greatest addiction is more. And it's more of anything. And not the cocaine and not the drink, but I need more approval and I need more love and I need more recognition, and I'm a slave to that. You know, I've spent my whole life since I was a kid, you know, I don't know whether I thought I was different at that time. I know that I certainly had some, you know, different angst as I was growing up, and fear and of not being accepted and stuff, but I spent my whole life with this attitude of, I must try harder. I must try harder. If I try harder, you'll love me. You know, you'll want me, you'll need me. you'll see me, you'll hear me. And this started, obviously with my parents and with my mum. I used to say for years and years, I was at war with my mum for 30 years. Actually, 47 years is more accurate when I first came into recovery. And I loved and I hated my mum with the same passion. I had this push and pull relationship with her that I carried on into my adult life in every other relationship that I ever had. It was pushing people away and it was drawing them back in because I need you, please love me. And if only my dad would just say just once, I'm really proud of you, Graham. I fought for that all my life. I looked up to my dad, I loved him. My dad is an absolute gentleman. And he worked hard and he had his own business and he was successful. And I thought if only I could do that, he might say he's proud of me. And I had so many different instances along the way as I was growing up. I remember I was 18 years old and I was at war with my mum, my parents. I was at war with everyone. I got in a lot of trouble in my teens. I was no criminal, but I did a lot of thievery and just idiotic stuff. And trying to impress. I used to work in a meat factory up in Muswell Hill, and the fellas I worked in there, they was a bit more seasoned and mature and older than me. And I used to go in with stories of stuff that I'd done and nicked and just, ridiculous. They used to call me the rebel without a clue. And that just sort of went through my life. But I left home when I was 18, and as I walked down the garden path and my mum was crying and going, what are you doing this? And it was all drama and all of this stuff. And I later on realised as I went through the big book, page 52, there'd be devilments, there would be devilments. I couldn't handle my emotional nature and I was having a problem in relationships with the people around me that I loved. And my reactions to everything were totally out of proportion to the situation that I was in. And I walked down a garden path and my mum was going, what are you doing, Gray? And I went, I'm leaving. She went, why are you leaving? I went, because I can't handle this family shit. And I left and I thought, I'll show you, I'll show the world, I'll be seen. And I went out there with an absolute determination to be seen and to prove myself and to, excuse my language ladies, and to pull a bird, right? I was a real late starter in life, as far as, romance and women was concerned, I was terrified. And I went out there and I had a few romantic sort of events, so to speak, and I thought, wow, man, this is good, this will fix me. And you know what, the recognition and the praise that used to come with that after a period of time, my mates used to go to me, I'll pull a bird, I'll tell you what, I could live on that forever. That adulation and recognition and all of that stuff. And do you know what the truth of it is this? I did have a lot of girlfriends, right? But I never told you about all the ones that knocked me back. I was just a tryer. I just kept on trying, and I thought to myself, well, it's a numbers game. So I went on through life and I was really successful and I had a lot of good friends and I was happy and I bought a lovely flat and it was all going well. I had my own business, but I had this underlying desire, this driving desire. Please, will my mum and dad please just once say they're proud of me? Do you know what? I remember going up to my mum and dad's, right? And the relevance of this is the spiritual malady within me. This is the spiritual malady that I don't feel enough. I've never felt enough. And I remember my business was doing well and me and my business partner had bought 2 new BMWs and my mum and dad lived up in Essex in a nice big house and I was driving up there with my wife and my kids. We were going to Sunday dinner and I pulled up and I couldn't wait to show my mum and dad my new car. This will show them. I'll get some praise now. right? And I pulled into their driveway, big, drive-in driveway, and I bigged up and that, and my mum come out and she went, first thing she went, look what the cat's dragged in. What time do you call this? Dinner's been on the table, right? And I thought, right? And I sat there through dinner with this festering resentment coming up inside me, and I couldn't contain myself. And I left, I dragged my kids out, my kids were crying, my mum come out and started giving it to me, and I lost it and I become an absolute animal, an abomination. Clean and sober, right? And I'm ashamed to say I kicked the front door down of their cottage. I threatened my mum, my dad shaped up to me, right, to protect his wife, and I shaped back up to my dad, and I'm ashamed of that. And you know what, so when I came into recovery, and look, that thing's terrifying me. So the next few years, cocaine came into my life, and the age of about 38, and my business was failing. I was at my lowest ebb. Everything that I'd wanted to achieve, to gain this respect, right, and approval, was falling apart. Not down to the drugs or anything like that. It was literally, I'd only just started using in the last sort of year of my business failing. I'd been knocked for a lot of money and the banks and everything else, and it was just circumstances, poor business decisions as well. And my business was falling apart, and I met this fella. It was my ex-wife's sister's fella, and he was a drug dealer, and we went out, he took us out for dinner, and on the way back in the car, this big limo, he reached down the side, some little pocket in the back of this beautiful great car, and he pulled out this lump of cocaine. It was like the size of my fist. I mean, I've never even seen a wrap. Right. And he got this out and he put it on a CD case and he carved off a bit, right, and he chopped it up into a couple of lines and he went, "Want some?" And I looked at my wife in the car and she went, and I went, "Yeah, go on then." and you can imagine that was straight off the rock, and it was like rocket fuel. And I took that, right. And honestly, like when you see the Popeye cartoons with the spinach, right? Ding, ding, right? Literally, that went through me like dynamite. And I remember the exact words that went through my head in that moment. I was at my lowest ebb, right? I felt worthless and useless, right? And as I took that cocaine and it got into me, right? This little thought what came into my head, it went, the kiddie's back. Back, right? Within a month and a half, I don't know, I was a slave to it. I was an absolute slave to it, right? And over the months and years that passed after that, I'd done more and more things that just made me absolutely ashamed. Absolutely ashamed. Do you know, I learned in here the difference between guilt and shame. Because for me, guilt was feeling bad about actually something I'd done, but I was ashamed. I was ashamed of who I was. Absolutely ashamed. I stole from my business partner. We were like brothers for 13 years. I remember sitting with my sponsor and reading in the big book for the first time. I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning madness was upon me, and I burst into tears. I could burst into tears now thinking about it. Because I'd done that. My wife was trying to support us doing 2 jobs. I'd lost my business, I'd lost everything. I was using every day. And I was ashamed. I remember going into all of my first meetings, and for quite a while, not too long, but for quite a while, I remember being at Upshire in Essex, and I remember Jeannie, the secretary, just shared back from the secretary, and I said, Graham, I'm an addict, and I went, I'm a dog of a man. I was in tears, and I'm an absolute dog of a man. And I met my sponsor at that meeting, and and he just came straight up to me. He was a bit leery. He is a bit leery, and he's a great character. And he came straight up and he went, "I can help you, Gray." I went, "I need some help." He went, "I know all about you." I didn't like that so much. He went, "I know all about you," and he said, "I can help you," and he did. And he made me a promise. We met at his offices in Ongar the following weekend, and we went through the steps over that weekend. And he just made me a promise. And he just said to me, "Gray, if you do what I did and you carry on doing what I do, you'll never have to drink or use again." And that was the only promise he gave me. And I thought, I'll have that. And do you know what? He set me right up. He set me right up, okay? I was sold. I was sold on recovery. And I thought, it's a new world. I've been reborn. I genuinely thought I've been reborn. There's an opportunity for me to change my life. Within a really short period of time of working the steps, getting a commitment. I was greeter at Upshire for the first year. I was terrified. It was a big meeting. It used to be 60, 70 people strong every week. I was terrified. Done all that usual stuff. "Hello mate, you're at the first meeting." I'm doing the chair. Oh God, all of that stuff. And he said to me one day, he went, "Do you know what, Gray?" He went, "There's no CA in Harlow." I went, "You're joking." I was like shocked, aghast. I couldn't believe it. Right? I went, "You're joking." He went, "Yeah, we need to do something about it." I went, "Yeah, we do." He went, I don't know anyone in Harlow. I don't know any churches." I went, I do. I went, "My vicar." I said, we got a vicar, that looks after our family. We had a family tragedy years earlier. And I went to see Albert, and I told him all about me, and I told him what I wanted to do. And I said, "Look, can we use your church hall?" And it was funny, right, because Simon got hold of me, and he saw what I was about in recovery, and I was like one of those, like one of those like toy monkeys with the drums. You wind them up and everything, and they just go like that. He wound me right up, and off I went. I was like that. I was like a lunatic. And I went to see Albert, and I went, "Yeah, and we need your church hall and that. When do you need it?" "Well, Friday night at 7:30. He went, "And what's it for?" I said, "Well, we're going to have a lot of drug addicts and alcoholics coming along and stuff like that." He went, "Well," he said, "we've got a bit of a problem there." He said, "Because the brownies come out at 7 o'clock. He said, "I don't think it's going to be a good mix with the mums and dads picking their kids up." But he introduced me to a lovely lady, Maria Crede. She was a German lady, and she ran another church, and she embraced us, and we started a meeting, and it was great, and it's one of the proudest things that I've ever been involved in, just starting that meeting. And so that was it. So I've learnt an awful lot. I heard a wonderful thing here the other day, right? Well, it wasn't actually here. It was someone from here speaking at another meeting, and they said, "I've never come up with or said anything original." Right? I loved it. I absolutely loved that, because I haven't, but I'd like you to think that I have, and because it's everything I've learnt and I've regurgitated, and and I've told other people, and I've been in sales all my life, but I worked for this big corporate company in sales and that, and a lot of the sales guys were sort of coming and going and looking at other companies and the benefits and the commissions and wanting to leave and all of that stuff. We were sitting in a sales meeting, and the sales manager went to us. He said, "Listen," he said, "if you're looking over the other side of the fence and the grass looks greener, start watering your own grass." Mm-hmm. And it's probably one of the best bits of spiritual advice that I've ever heard, right? Because it's so easy to look outside of ourselves in recovery, in life and whatever, and see other people's gifts, in their recovery, in their life, and whatever is going on, and think how wonderful that is, right? But every one of us has got our problems. Every one of us is dealing with our own stuff, and I was 5 minutes, okay. And so this I want to include this in my story. I want to include this as well, and this. Being convinced that self is what had defeated us. That's what it tells us in the big book. Self defeated us. There's a distinction between the two. Self defeated us. Right? We looked at its common manifestations, I think, in various forms. Resentment is the number one offender. And we know this stuff, and I did all my writing about it at the beginning and everything. What is resentment? I kept saying, what is it? I thought I knew what resentment was. I thought, yeah, I'm angry. I'm always angry. I'm angry at everyone. And I looked it up. And resentment, the word resentment comes from the Latin root word sentia, to feel. And with the prefix re, it means again, to feel again. I thought, oh my God, that's me. You know, I'll re-feel everything over and over again. You know, all of those initial traumatic experiences that just hurt me. And I just re-feel them over and over again, and they get more and more and more painful. It says, and when dealing with resentment, I know you know this stuff, but I love this stuff. When dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. You know, do you know what? There is something about this process, right, of understanding, when we're taken through the book, and understanding our powerlessness, not just over our substances, but over the people and the things that are going on in our life. And from that point of humiliation, that managing somehow, by the skin of our teeth or God's grace, to reach some kind of humility, right, to say, I offer myself to you, and then start writing it down. And that process of getting it out of my head and writing it down on paper just straightens it out. I can't do that in my head. But a combination of that humility and that honesty and that willingness and setting it on paper and sharing it with someone else. I can write it down. I can sit there incensed. How could you think that about me? Right? Oh, I'm not going to write about it. You know, it's so unjust. You know, Gray, you've got to write about it. You've got to write about it. And I drag myself to the pen and paper and I start writing it out. I can be halfway through the first sentence and going, you are an idiot. You are a clown. You really are a clown. I don't know where you get your ideas from. It just manages. But you know what the beauty of it is as you get into like the you know, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever, however you've done it, right? It doesn't matter, right? You know, and it says, I have been. Right, it's like I missed it for a long time, right? It's in the past tense. I am not this. I have been this as a result of my fear. You know, see, it's like that fear drives that delusion, that lie that goes that I listen to in my head, you know, that's behind that selfish attitude that results in my selfish actions, time and time again. It's just an absolute gift to have this. So, preaching over. So anyway, I'm coming up to 10 years and I'll finish on this, right? I know where I'm at. I'm sorry I'm going on, I'm getting excited, all right? So I'm coming up to 10 years and it's November 2019. And people that know me and that have been in recovery with me for that time and that have heard me share 1,000 times about my devotion and my absolute utmost love for my wife. I used to say, I really am an old romantic, and I used to say to people, do you know what, I loved her before I met her. I was so romantic. And but I did, I felt like I loved her so much that I couldn't live without her. And but she became like my cocaine. You know, I was so dependent on her. And on the 19th of November 2019, I was doing a chair at my own group and she called me into the garage. I said, what's up? And she went, I'm leaving you. 29 years of marriage. And my world imploded. You know, this was my hub, my nest. This was everything from childhood that I desired. You know, that security around of having my family unit of my daughters and my wife and my home. And she took it away from me in that instant. And it absolutely killed me. I wanted to die. I'm not dramatising. I wanted to commit suicide. And I ended up living in this like little tiny 2-bedroom house. And I just thought, what has happened? And my close friends in recovery were saying to me, Gray, you need to work your program, mate, like you did when you first come in, because your life depends on it. Not that I'd fallen short, but your life depends on it. And so that as we were going into the spring and that summer, I sponsored 4 guys, right? They saved my life. Okay, I woke up every morning, I fell out of bed onto my knees and I was crying as I was awaking. Right? I was asking God for courage just to put one foot in front of the other. I used to say my prayer every single morning was, dear God, no matter how far down the scale I'm going, please let my experience help someone else. And I will take this. Right? And my other favourite, it's a phrase in the big book, a sentence in the big book, which is a prayer to me. Right, which has completely gone out of my head now. Cling to the thought that in God's hands the dark past is the greatest possession you have. Okay, and that dark past might be 10 years ago, it might be 5 minutes ago, but in God's hands it is the greatest possession, because it enables me to take that journey from my head, which is fear, into my heart, which is a semblance of courage. I might not even feel courageous, okay, but just putting one foot in front of the other is the greatest act of courage that I can demonstrate. You know, and I sponsored those guys, and they helped me get well. They gave me time to get well again, enough so I could stand on my own 2 feet and actually go out into the world again with my head held high. I learnt an awful lot about myself in that time as well, and I did a lot of intense written work and stuff. And do you know what I found? I found that in those last 5 years of my marriage I was so unhappy, and yet I was so dependent on my wife, and I was so easily hurt and sensitive, and it's allowed me to grow and become stronger. And I still get it wrong, and I'm still afraid. You know, I'm afraid now. I've got stuff going on in my life at the moment. It's change, and we don't like change, and I'm frightened. Okay, but each morning I just ask God a simple prayer, just give me the courage to put one foot in front of the other. Alright, I trust you even though I don't know where we're going, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.